What are some things that have stood out that you're hoping or have seen work?
We released a documentary a year after we launched Flight Crew called Into the Earth. And we had went out, it's just long form story, and there's a lot that it covered. And what we had found or discovered through the human-centric design process is that people really engaged with that, and they wanted that experience to feel and see even deeper what mission aviation is and what it is like. How could they be a part of the story?
Tracey Werre, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Super good to have you. I'm looking forward to this conversation today. You're with an organization called Mission Aviation Fellowship, often referred to as MAF in our world. And you have such a unique fundraising context. I think it's interesting because, and you and I have known each other really since you in the latest kind of iteration of investing in building recurring giving, but you're not doing it in a vacuum. You're doing this in a context of an organization with a huge, long history of one-to-one missionary support, and you have deep donor relationships and a really tangible mission. So today, I think it's going to be really interesting to talk through what's like to grow recurring giving at an organization that really honors the DNA of the organization while adding more flexible revenue for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but before we get into your recurring giving program, which is known as Flight Crew, I'd love to just start with your own journey. How has your path, because I know you've got a marketing kind of digital background, but how does that path kind of led into fundraising at MAF?
Yeah, I would say I never thought I would, let alone be in fundraising, nonprofit, or let alone with a Christian organization. I got my marketing degree, and I thought I was going to go into the startup. Well, I did go into the startup in the tech world in .coms. And then, we hit that .com slide where everything was just kind of failing and not happening. And, I just kind of lost my job in that tech space and just was kind of brought to my knees on what's next. And God had a different journey for me. And so he brought me into the nonprofit and into MAF world. I mean, let alone, I went from basically fashion to aviation is what I always say. So was never thinking at all this was my path. But so because of my digital background and my background in social, and MAF was just kind of on that, just on the floor of what's next with that. And so,
And
yes.
when was that?
16 years ago, just about.
16 years ago. So that kind of mid 2000s, late 2000s.
Yeah,
that very much that .com bubble. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think we're in a moment right now where nobody's calling it a bubble, but I do think the subscription economy people think of a little bit as a bubble. Like, isn't that passe? Isn't there like subscription fatigue? By the way, all those things are true. But the thing that's interesting to me is that I think it's also a sign of maturity because the .com bubble was actually it's not like e-commerce went away, or spending money online, but there was this kind of reckoning, for lack of a better term, in terms of like what's viable, what's actually works. And so when people talk about the subscription economy in those terms, I think actually this is a beautiful time because we're just starting to see real maturity. There's only so many subscriptions you can get tricked into before you're like, I'm not getting fooled again, right? Don't sign me up for that, right? And I think it's an opportunity, actually, if we think about it from a fundraising perspective, to create more mature, valuable, recurring giving programs.
Yeah, I think we're at that point where it's the loyalty part of it, I think. So it's not just I do think we have the experiential and transactional, and they both have their paths and their benefits, right? Because they do bring donors in different ways for different reasons. And so I think we are hitting that point. Like you said, we've kind of climbed. People know it's a little bit more behavior. Now it's just, they're committing to it. It's that they're a fan of your brand. They're a fan of your program. And so how can you just kind of keep that loyalty there and keep them engaged and involved? Yeah.
When you think about loyalty, I've said this before, but if you look at the giving from a new recurring donor, 97% of the value from new recurring donors is after the first gift. So what are we doing in terms of loyalty and retention and cultivation and caring for these donors? So we're going to get into that today. But I wanted you to set the stage for our listeners because, as I mentioned, you all at MAF have a unique funding background in that you have a long history of what I would refer to in the industry as one-to-one fundraising. These are individuals who are raising their own support. And there are a lot of charities, especially in the faith-based space, that have done this kind of one-to-one style program, and it's wonderful and it's powerful. And while it's changed over the years, it's still a viable way of raising support. But it also presents some challenges, right? Because if you're looking at raising money for the central office, so to speak, or the general fund, or where needed most, depending on how you talk about it, that can present a challenge. So just for our listeners' sake, just kind of describe that reality, where you were even as you began to think about investing big in a general recurring giving program.
Yeah. So typically MAF is we like to refer to it as a three prong stool or something. We're funded in three ways in the sense of the org funding, our career staff or missionary staff support pool, and then the fee for service. So for some flights in aviation that aren't funded on a slight scale or through us, like if a government or something, there's a fee for that. So we're funded typically in that way. And we've definitely seen a shift in the years in how that model and even the percentage of that funding. And so MAF is over 80 years. We're 81 years this month, actually. And so, we've been around for a while. And so a lot of that support, even initially, was through career staff. So that's a missionary family going out and raising their support themselves. And they have their startup fund, but they have to raise their monthly support. And so the ethos, I think, in them, and this is way before my time or even here, was already ingrained to get that sustainer, that monthly donor, a prayer supporter versus as well as that fund, that monthly donor, or even the one time we would default a lot of times, the early times when I started here, would default on the monthly donors for career support to monthly. And that would be a big part of their ask. And so when I came in, what we had seen is the org had a program called Adopt a Plane. It was way before my time. And it was not working. It was not really doing much of anything for monthly donors for the organization. And where we had seen was probably about 7 years ago, me and my friend Mickey, who was a direct mail, we were like, we've got to figure out how to bring sustaining income to the organization. And we really think we need to invest in recurring. We need to completely ditch Adopt a Plane, and because it's too hard to maintain and it's not working, and create and build a new program. Because we want to be able to raise, sustainable income just like staff do. And my area is more responsible. We raise for the org. We have a ministry partnership who raises and, helps coach and work with the career staff. So what we have seen even over the years with that was there's a fluctuation even in your staff. It's, just staff. Typically years ago we had staff who were like staying for 40 years, but there's a shift just even in that and how long a person stays. So it's less reliable to have, rely on income from the career staff pool in that sense. We've hit quite a wave over the last 5-6 years of our staff retiring, and it takes a lot more to get new staff in. And so there was just a lot of, conglomerate or, a lot of things who came together that we were like, okay, this is a strategy we need to formulate and figure out what's the product or the experience in order to bring recurring into the org space.
Yeah. Well, there's two principles I want to kind of draw out because there's a lot of charities that are in that I think have some shared realities. So one is the idea that an organization like an MAF, I've worked with a lot of organizations that have a one-to-one model, but it's more of a staff support style model, and those organizations often will kind of brag, for lack of a better term, about, 90% of our funding is recurring. But that's because they're looking at all of their giving, including those two. In your case, you call them career staff. And that's wonderful, by the way. And if I'm giving to help Jonathan in Chennai, India, our gift is an automated recurring gift. But the thing I want organizations that have staff support to understand is, no, we're actually talking about your general fund just as much as we're talking about that. So you saw that 7 years ago. And then also the value of, for lack of a better term, diversification. Like, what does it look like to create a stable central funding? Because even staff support actually does come, grow and shrink over time. And so, what does it
Yeah.
look like?
Staff leave, and then that creates even more deficit. Yeah.
Okay, so you saw that 7 years ago. You said we got to do something about this. Like, what did you do? So we know today the program is called Flight Crew. You mentioned to me, and we'll dig into this, that it's, when you and I saw each other in Nashville recently, you said we're on version 5.0, and I was like, oh man, we need to catch up. Because by the way, for those of you that are listening, if you read the book, actually tell some of the origin story of Mission Aviation Fellowship's Flight Crew in the book. So, but again, take us back to 7 years ago. You're like, I think this is important. How do you move from 0 to 1? Like, how do you even just get started?
Yeah. It just started with the conversation, and we were working with you guys with Masterworks, um and we had brought it to, I think it was even just our direct mail strategy meeting, because that's what you guys were doing, direct mail, not the digital. But we were like, hey, we really want to build up a recurring program and model. And at that point, it was still a lot of people in leadership like, no, that'll decrease revenue. That'll People will give less. They'll give, smaller amounts. And so there was definitely that still then a level of fear of what that would affect to the bottom line. But we just kind of pushed into it, and we go, we want to do it right. Want to develop as a product and an experience. And that's when Alan Thornburg came in and worked with us. And we did that human centric design approach that he's really good at. And so we didn't work from this outside or inside, not even inside space. We went out to the donors. We went out and we asked them, and we ran concepts by them. And through that, even the names and a whole different slew of questions, and who's MAF, how do you give? And through that development is how we came up with Flight Crew and built out the program.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into that because, and for our listeners' sake, just hearing, being a little bit of behind the scenes on that story, you were working with your fundraising agency, Masterworks, where I was at the time, and you were like, "Hey guys, I know we're doing direct mail here. I know we're doing fundraising, but we've got to figure out this recurring giving." Which, number one, kudos to you to be like, "Hey, I'm working with some folks that are experts in fundraising. Let's put this challenge to them." To your point, Alan Thornburg, who's a dear friend and actually just launched out with Sublimity, who was deeply passionate. Alan and I were working together at the time, and just deeply passionate about how can we use these practices of human-centered design, kind of like you've heard of companies like IDEO or different companies that have done product design for shopping carts and computer mice, but also what if we use those techniques to help create recurring giving programs? So you invested in that. You said, okay, let's create a program using this kind of talking to donors. What was the earliest version then of Flight Crew? Like, one, why call it Flight Crew? And two, what was the earliest version of that? Like just the
Yeah.
bare bones version.
Yeah. So the MVP, the minimal viable product, right? So the first launch was, well, the vision of what the first launch is not what came to be. So Alan came in and we're like, if you could dream big, what would it be? And we're like, oh, we're going to have a flight following experience. We're going to be able to go to the field and create this whole series of videos and just really show the story and impact. And, what ended up was, because of tech and safety and security, we couldn't do the flight following then. And that was what came out of a lot of the interviews. What we had found is a lot of those in aviation have flight follower apps, and they love to be able to like hit their app and look up and see what planes are in the area. Even though here our planes are not in the area because they're overseas, international in Africa. Unless you're in Africa, then you might be able to see them. But and so we were trying to figure out what's a version of that, and even what would be an experience that we could really get people invested and tell the story where they could come alongside it. And so that's kind of what came out of it. It was the lesser than what we wanted version of it because we couldn't roll out and launch, with that first beta with everything we wanted. So we did a little pivoting and try to create it a little bit with a chat bot. We were able to send our team to the field to get some video stories in a different kind of way and make them very special. and exclusive for, flight crew members. And then there was a debate on the flight crew name. There was a lot of back
Okay.
and forth on it. So even Al and his team gave us a little pushback because they were like, co-pilot, like all these others. And we were like, no,
Co-pilot, that would have
ground
aged well.
crew, ground crew, and a lot of others were like, no, it's gotta be flight crew. We like flight crew. And they
Yeah.
took it back to the donors and the people that we had interviewed, like a group of them. The flight crew really just sat with them both well. They really liked it. And so
Yeah.
we ran with it since.
Well, just to accentuate a few things, first of all, you talked to donors. This was this human-centered design approach. One of the themes that emerged was this idea that people were really fascinated with the aviation part of Mission Aviation Fellowship, which for our listeners, if you're not familiar with MAF, um, you all essentially, well, I'm going to butcher it, but you essentially fly people and supplies all around the world. So there's a very aviation centric. You have planes. You talked about the adopt a plane, fundraising technique, and so there are actual pilots and planes and things being operated. And so some of the donors were really, really fascinated with the aviation part of Mission Aviation Fellowship. But and this is a thing that I don't know if you thought about in hindsight. One of the things I talk a lot about is how do we help donors put them see themselves in the story. So much classic fundraising mistake is help us do what we, the nonprofit, does for some sort of beneficiary. But good fundraising gets the nonprofit out of the middle and puts the donor in the story. And I think you have to do the same in spades with recurring giving. And I think the idea of flight crew is be a part of the flight crew. You are helping make this happen. This is not you are helping us do things. It's you, donor, are a part of the team.
When we first launched, some of the best responses when we wrote back after we launched, I think it was probably about 6 months. We did a survey with those first people. So we had a few hundred donors that we grandfathered into it, to the program from Adopt a Plane. And then we had the new donors we had gained over those first few months of launch. And we had asked them, about the experience and how it hit. And that's exactly, I mean, that was why probably the most exciting is some of the feedback we got is that I'm getting a bird's eye view of what this ministry is doing and what I'm a part of. So it's that bird's eye view. Or we've even had people say, I feel like the co-pilot. I feel like I'm in that airplane, and I'm right there delivering medicine and, products or, equipment to these people or doctors or even helping deliver Bibles. Like I get to be a part of that celebration.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where we were, excited to see it launch and kind of see that development.
Well, I've got a couple questions here, but they mostly are around what did you focus on trying to solve for early on, and I'll give you a little color context there because you may be able to speak to this. I think a lot of organizations do get paralyzed because they think they have to have a program to do recurring giving program fundraising, and they've got to come up with a brand and cool, pretty landing page and all that stuff. And I always feel that tension of like, but there's stuff you could do right now while you're creating that program. Obviously, you did create a program. You did choose to kind of go big in some ways from the beginning. But what were you really trying to solve for right there at the early onset? Like getting those new donors in, like what did that look like? What were you really trying to solve for?
I think we were really just trying to create some way to involving them deeper in the sense of a commitment. I think it was more, I mean, one-time donors are great and generosity, across the board, any gift matters. We were really looking to develop that faithful donor relationship where they feel like they are a part of it. They're part of the ministry and they're going to have that deeper engagement and commitment. And so there's the whole financial aspect, right? Of course, we're learning, we're trying to develop something that's going to increase revenue. It's going to increase the number of donors. It's going to give an opportunity for new donors. And so I think that what we learned from it after launch and what we invested in is we need to make it easy for them to see and give monthly and across the board. If they see flight crew and they give through it, that's fine, but also just make it easy to see how they could give monthly.
Yeah.
And so that's where we did not do a great job with our donation form. And we've seen since we've made transitions in the last year that now with upgrades and the better system, you can get even more recurring donors in the door.
Yeah, go into that because I was gonna ask what did you eventually realize needed to change? So talk about was it just sort of the donation flow or the clarity that this is a monthly gift? What was that?
I think we learned a lot of things just from the process over the first few years. We did great out the gate. Like we really hit 4 times what the expectation was in the first few months of launch. And I will say we did offer an incentive. We had for the first 500, we had a welcome kit, right? So had some VR, head glass, the stickers, the swag or whatever. And then when we asked donors after about that, if that was, something they liked or incentivized, and you know how it is with, especially with Christian donors, like, I don't want the stuff. Like, don't give me the
Yeah.
stuff. So really didn't move the dial that much as it was working more with our current donors, because that's where we started. We started digitally and we started it with our current donor base, as more like an upgrade or an opportunity to join this community and do something a little bit different with their giving. And just really reinforce what recurring could do.
So
And how
just to make sure I'm tracking, so you had an incentive. This is the early stuff that, you had an incentive. It was digital focused. You went to current donors. Presumably there was kind of a big splash. You did a bunch of communications. That's one of the things organizations I think miss is like, oh, it actually pays to regularly communicate about a thing, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did a whole campaign. It was like our big focus right before year, because we launched September. Nothing like launching in, COVID year as well. So it did delay. We were supposed to launch earlier. We launched a little bit later in 2020. And so we had a few months, but it hit right before that year. And so we did a whole big launch focus leading into the new year, or the calendar year end campaign. And then so that gave us enough learning to figure out when we went into the next year and building, or how we can now continue to build on that. And so that's, even our campaign, we would do a monthly campaign that was very much recurring or flight crew focus. And so we started doing those 1 or 2 times a year as well. So
Okay.
where that was your focus for an entire month.
If you're a nonprofit leader thinking seriously about the future of recurring giving, I want to take just a moment to share a resource with you. My book, The Rise of Sustainable Giving, is now available as an audiobook, narrated by me and designed for leaders who want to grow sustainable recurring revenue in today's subscription economy. This book brings together 2 decades of working with charities, deep research into the subscription economy, and practical frameworks for building recurring giving programs that last. Whether you're just getting started with monthly giving or you're looking to take an existing program to the next level, this audiobook is meant to meet you where you are on a walk, in the car, or between meetings. And even if you've already read the print edition, many leaders are finding that listening to the book helps them hear the ideas differently and spot new opportunities. You can find The Rise of Sustainable Giving audio edition wherever you listen to audiobooks. If you care about growing generosity that's sustainable for your donors, your organization, and your mission, I hope you'll give it a listen. How was the yeah, so you do a couple campaigns a year. What was the donation kind of piece to the puzzle you were just talking about? Was that just making it easier? What did that look like as far as more recent improvements?
Yeah. More recent, it was just so when the middle of all this, we migrated to a new CRM. So we
Fun.
it was a whole 3 years of that process of Salesforce. And so then we got delayed a little bit in testing and getting some things done because of just that transition. And we couldn't do some of the things we were ready to do with recurring. And then what we have tested in and out was we tested donation platforms. And so we did tests of our Salesforce platform that was built versus Fundraise Up was the one that we have chosen. And that's the one we're on now, and seen a huge difference. And some of that has even come in with, we've gotten, uh, I want to say 20% more, even an increase in recurring since we launched with them full on. And that was last fall.
Yeah. Well, it's a testament to how important technology is to I always talk about technology can be your biggest barrier or your best allies to scaling recurring giving, and that's a great example. Okay, so you started with Flight Crew. You had this conviction, right? We've got to diversify. We've got to build our general funding, and recurring giving is the priority. You use this human centered design process to develop and design the program. You launch the program. you focused early on digital, going to current donors, and you had some incentive, right? But you made a big splash, so to speak, and that it was and I by the way, I remember being behind the scenes then. That was such a thrilling time to see those early results and just so promising and encouraging. So you mentioned, and you don't need to take me through version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, but you mentioned 5.0. So give me a sense of just sort of from the we think this is a thing, let's launch a thing, and it's promising to today. Just give me a sense of that journey over the last few years.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say we like did official 2.03. We pretty
Right.
much skipped from launch. I won't say skip because throughout the time we were growing, changing, learning, doing what we could to improve it with the systems and programs we had and just capacity. And the team that's on all org general mass fundraising, not just not just one person who owns recurring donors. So we were focused on kind of adapting that and growing it, changing. And we went out, we did great out the gate. We were seeing that growth, and then we just started to see a decline. As far as like, it was harder and harder to get those new recurring donors or even upgrading a current donor to that. And it was really kind of hitting this wall of like, what are we doing wrong? How can we improve this? And we were still having our recruiting months, and we were just like, they just aren't doing what they were doing. And we just had to keep thinking through, okay, how can we improve this? How can we learn from this? And, we even adopted what is it working? What is it working with staff? Like, where is kind of what's their journey been, and when can we adopt that? And that's when we decided at that point we need to revamp it. And we called it 5.0 because the whole idea is we were going to relaunch it on our 5th year of it.
Fair. Yeah.
We missed that because we were in the middle of a donation page platform change, but we still had the experience. And so we went back out to we worked with Alan again, and we went back out and did another human-centric design approach.
That's great. And what were some of the things that came out of that? And I mean, you're probably early on in that pivot, or in the evolution, if that's the right term. What are some things that have stood out that you're hoping or have seen
Yeah.
work?
I think some of the things that we'd seen, even some of the people we went back to, so we thought we were going to go back, and we'd been working kind of behind the scenes with our aviation team and tech team and exploring, well, what would it be if we now did get to launch with that flight follower aspect of the experience, or if we built that? And so we were working with this ArcGIS kind of background tech space and thinking if we could create something, even if it was delayed. And so we took some of those concepts or those ideas back to our donors. And what we had kind of seen is the shift that it was kind of like, yeah, you have apps for that. Maybe not so much an appetite for that. But we went back and we had different concepts. And one of the ones that Alan had taken back to him was we released a documentary about 5 years ago as well, just a year after we launched Flight Crew, called Into the Earth. And we had went out, and it's just long form story, and there's a lot that it covered. And what we had found or discovered through the human centric design process is that people really engaged with that, and they wanted that experience to feel and see even deeper what mission aviation is and what it is like in living in cutoff communities for the people that we serve, and how could that story and how could they be a part of that story. So we went back to the drawing board and created a different element, a different experience, new landing pages, new design and experience, so that we could create some new ads to drive that. And we also were releasing our new video on demand. So,
Okay. And how does that, forgive me, how does that connect with the Ends of the Earth film? You mentioned that. That's something that's resonated. Are you saying you took insights from that, or you actually applied that specifically to Flight Crew in some way?
we actually applied it specifically where we were offering them, because we were now just releasing our new video on demand on our website. And so we were giving them access to stream it. And so,
Oh, okay. So new Flight Crew donors can stream this as kind of a incentive as a part of the value proposition. Okay, that's great. So you've been on this journey for 5 years, and I hope one of the things that I hope our listeners take away from some of these conversations is a lot of my conversations with leaders is 7 years ago, 9 years ago, 5 years ago. This is a journey, right? First step is to actually believe this can be for you. Second step is to then make it a priority. Third step is to actually do stuff, right? To grade it. And it's so tempting on a show like this to try to simplify everything and put a nice little bow on the top of it and say, and then our recurring giving grew. And it's like, no, it's hard work. It takes real dedicated resources. But just paint a picture for folks like where is Flight Crew today, just in terms of scale, maturity, and its importance to
Yeah.
MAF.
Yeah. We've gone from, I'm going to talk specifically on the org side, so not the
Right. These are
previous steps we're
the
through.
where needed most, the
Yeah.
general fund, the flight and the
The
bird
general
dollars.
fund. So we went from a few hundred to, we probably had that we grandfathered in. So, I think it was probably like 700 that we had in monthly donors when we first started. And we've now built that to thousands. Um,
Yeah.
and like I said, we've seen a lot of growth in that first year or two, and then kind of level off, just that typical ebb and flow. And now we've seen another increase. Now we've launched the Flight Crew 5.0. We've really invested in the platform, and we've just increased um, transactionally and experiential. So I think it's important to think through having both those elements if you can.
Yeah. No, and it is to your point. It's not just a great experience or again, a great metaphor, a good creative. It's like, can they actually sign up? Is it very easy? Like, what does that process look like? So I think you're right. And let me, just say, I'm so excited for you guys. I love the journey that you've been on, that you continue to be on. Do you have a sense of, like,
It's also fun.
say that again?
It's a learning process all the time. There's
Yeah.
no like we have not nailed it at all. We're still working through it how we can continue to improve it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's powerful. Well, but it's you don't want to, it's an exceptional experience to see that, going from that 700 or so donors to thousands. And for you, how significant is recurring giving now on that general fund side as a percentage of revenue? You have a sense of that?
Yeah. If you look on the general side, we went from, not even 1% of revenue. But our revenue's grown increasingly too. So just in general, we've grown revenue, digitally has really, 30% year over year, 20 to 30%. And so
On the
if you
digital
even
revenue
think
side,
through that, what that percentage has been, and we've been very blessed. We have faithful donors regardless. That's helped us grow. We're really investing in new donor acquisitions. So with that, we've grown revenue, but we're probably, I would say, recurring revenue in general on all sides is about 25% with staff and org. If you look at just org, we're probably about 14%.
yeah,
Just kind of looking at like last year.
yeah, yeah. Wow. And that's part of what I encourage leaders to do is look at your own numbers, benchmark yourself against yourself.
Right.
Don't compare yourself to World Vision or,
Yeah.
Save the Children or Charity Water, right?
Compassion.
Compassion. And every organization, every model is slightly different. And that's why with staff supported organizations, these one-to-one style charities, I'm very much like, hey, we got to look at those numbers differently. What is your staff support? And that's wonderful. And there's some things we can do there, but let's look at the general fund.
Yeah.
Um, that's so encouraging. I want to ask you, what has it meant for you and for the organization to have that kind of reliable recurring revenue coming in each new fiscal year?
It means we can pivot. So I'll give examples of just over the last few years of what MAF has experienced. So we work in very dangerous places. We are in Haiti. Right now we're in the Congo. We're dealing with Ebola flights. So it just means, or the fuel crisis, even if you throw fuel and the cost of fuel and scarcity,
Yeah.
it means that we've got that recurring giving and can count on those millions of dollars we make in that year that we can use that for evacuation. We can use that for that emergency flight like we did for the doctor and his family that we had to fly from Congo to Uganda. So it means that those things that you can't plan for, it means that even though fuel is more expensive And that's driving our costs up. It's going to continue at this point unless, we see something happen with the economy and the fuel prices. But um, all those things mean that we can pivot and we can do the work. The work won't stop. Our work won't stop because we've got sustainers and our flight crew members who are helping us to continue to serve.
Yeah. How does it, when you think about this as a fundraiser, as somebody internally, I think about the confidence, the forecasting, the ability to take risks. How does it help the organization think beyond immediate fundraising pressure?
It helps us really kind of envision and think about growth. So, especially I think about for, me in my role and focusing on new donors, it means now I can figure out we've got sustainers. Now I can figure out how I can take and work some of that so that we can reach new people who still don't know about MEF, so that we can serve more people. And so that we can even try some new things and we can go out, we can get, the sustainers don't necessarily get the capital campaign with the $1 million airplanes, but it helps bring the awareness and the people to the organization that could bring that major donor. So it just helps grow that community of faithful supporters who are, key to us being able to keep doing our work.
Yeah, I'm curious, you mentioned the capital campaign and major donors. Have you seen any integration or overlap with your major gifts team? Any opportunities to say, hey, let's look at our flight crew donors and either do some sort of overlay, wealth overlay, or other sort of behavioral detection to see if there are potential middle or major donors in there?
It definitely is a source or way because the broad base is our biggest driver to finding that mid and major. And we do have some, I would say I couldn't tell you how many, but we definitely have some higher net worth who are given the, 10,000 monthly dollars or $10,000 a month monthly because that's just the way they want to give. And I think it's more just about meeting that donor where they are and how they want to give and not close enough, not just be saying, okay, we get it. You want to give $1 million gift. Maybe you want to break it up into 12 months. Hey, that's an option.
Yeah,
And
that's
that is,
amazing.
that'll work.
Yeah.
So
And I always like to say major donors are subscribers too. And some of them, it's just like, hey, I want to, want that either cash flow or for whatever reason they want to give. And that we do see donors signing up for these programs at those higher levels, which is always fascinating.
and for me, I want to be able to treat our monthly donors. Even that $5 monthly donor that's that grandma who's praying for you every day or gives you, sacrifices that outer gift. In my mind, because I'm a broad-based focus, she's just as important
Yeah.
because she is deeply committed and she knows that, or we help her know that her gift is that important and that it means everything to an isolated person who was just able, a pregnant mom, to be able to get medevac out to deliver her baby. Like she knows she's a part of that story.
So powerful. Well, hey, I'm thinking about our listeners who are in that place. Their programs, either they launched a program and it's either flat or down. They are thinking, man, we've got to get off the roller coaster that is, this other funding mechanism. We've got to diversify. Looking back at flight crew and that, Tracey of, 5, 6 years ago, what have been like, what I'm kind of looking for what have been the biggest lessons, but the way I'll ask it this way is what would you repeat like every time? What would you do differently or what would you simplify?
Mm, wow. I think what I don't know that I would repeat or simplify. I think some of it's just in my own learning and acceptance that we haven't got everything right. That there's still things that we need to do, and we still have a lot of donors. Even when we go back to them and we ask them why they gave or why they joined flight crew, you know, a miss that we've learned is there's still people that don't have a full understanding of flight crew, especially if they came in a different way off an ad that did, or just came to mf.org and gave monthly because that's how they give. Um, so I think what we've done right is just taking a chance. We've done right with just investing in the program and the product and to keep it going. And then also just in accepting failure, that it's not always going to be the right way or the right thing at the gate. and things are not going to work out sometimes. And so you just go back to the drawing board. What can we do? What can we change? What is in our control? What can we improve? And so I think it's just being on that, which becomes kind of a hamster wheel, but that always learning cycle, just always learning and keep that open mind that there's always opportunity to learn and grow.
Well, the way
I
I
don't know if that answers the question.
No, it totally does. And I think about, we always say is the rabbit hole that is sustainable giving is way deeper than I think most people understand. And it does remind me, speaking of your background with the .com and e-commerce, it reminds me of those mid 2000s digital era where it was like fundamentally we were figuring it out. Like we were building the plane as we were flying it, to use an aviation metaphor. And I think we're in that place right now with recurring giving in this new era, this new subscription giving era. And I think what I'm hearing from you, number one, I appreciate just the humility. Like, we're not perfect. Like, we made it a priority and we took action. Like, those are the two most important things that I'm taking away from today. Like, and you believed in it to go beyond the one test or the like, can we do one direct mail piece or can we send one email? And if it doesn't work, then we decide that I guess recurring giving is not for us. No, you committed. You understand you're not perfect. You accepted failure, but you also have the discipline to keep moving forward and keep taking action. And I think that's so critical because there's so much to learn. And I do think the organizations sometimes can get too caught up in well, we're going to have one at bat and we're going to have one swing. And if we don't hit a home run, then I guess it wasn't for us. And I really think we've got to challenge that assumption. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think in order to, be innovative and not even just creative in the sense of just finding what works for you. And I think you can simplify it. And, some of it's just test changing the default of the tab on your donation platform to monthly. I mean, those are depending on your platform, but even just putting out there, it's not creating a product experience is great. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of time and commitment. And, hopefully you see, 10 times that investment. But there's definitely simple and easy things that you can start to do and just try and see if it even just moves the dial.
Yeah.
Because that dial is gonna, it's gonna start to add to it. And you just will learn more and more as you do that.
Let me ask you about that specifically. What are some of those early potential tactics or strategies to maybe play with? Because, when we do our assessment and roadmap process for organizations on recurring giving, we look at 10 different areas. One of the 10 is program design. Like, what is the program? Do you have a program? What is the value proposition? Those things. That's one of 10 areas. And I don't say that to overwhelm our listeners. I say that to say there's a lot of other levers we can also be looking at and pushing. So when you think about, if a listener, is prioritizing recurring giving, what's a practical step or a couple steps that, like, man, you obviously don't know who we're talking about because, this is sort of nonprofit leader XYZ. What would you say, if I were you, here's what I'd look at least early on?
I think look at first just making it easy and removing any friction from your donation platform. And like I said, even adding a support monthly, like we even stay support monthly and not join Flight Crew because if you just come to the website, you may not know what Flight Crew is yet. So even just simply adding that button or adding it to your drop down and just making it easy to give that monthly gift before or while you're even, if you decide to create a program or an experience. Take a risk on an email. What's that going to hurt? An email I send you, explain why monthly giving could change your organization or how it can help. Or before you even have a community, you could still talk about, hey, we want to build a community. Will you start up and help us and be some of the first to do that? Like, help us get this off the ground. Because I think there's a lot of your current donors or even people that they want to belong to something. There's just this sense of belonging. And before you even really have a program to develop, you could start to think through how you can get some of those key people to start that with you.
So powerful. So powerful. Remove friction, just be clear, take a risk, like, do make some of those communications. I want to pivot as we come to a close here and thinking about the future. Flight Crew, 5.0. So let's say in 5 years you're at 10.0, right? What do you think will matter most, at least just from your perspective right now? I mean, it's always the crystal ball question, but what do you think is going to matter most over the next 5 years?
I think for us, I think where we're at right now with 5.0, because we've been digital first, is where we're at is how do we take it from the digital experience out to our events? And how do we, I mean, it kind of almost goes back, right? It goes back to that compassion world vision model of, so, adopt a child or, their concerts, and they would get thousands of people or whatever donors, monthly donors at those programs. And so we're exploring what does it look like to have that kind of program where we take some entertaining element and turning it into something for a cause and a way to support MEF in a big grand way. And so, for us, for the growth that we're looking for the next 10 years, that's really a strategy we're looking to deploy. And then also just really focused on acquisition and growing and top of funnel. We're really top of funnel focused right now. And MEF is still obscure and still a brand that not everybody knows. And I know we're not going to be a world vision, but I'd like to get it out of being this niche, only aviation focused. I want churches and Christians, more people to know about us so they can see the value of the experience in the community and being that faithful partner.
Yeah. Well, I think your pivot from like, is this for us? Is this something that can be a substantial part, from less than 1% of revenue to, okay, this is for us, 14% of revenue, 5 years. Number one, that's incredible. Again, I think we've got to celebrate those milestones along the way. But at the same time, realizing like our ambition and our mission is such that it's going to require serious scale. And so we're not just going to sort of assume the status quo. And I think that's one of the biggest dangers organizations fall into. They celebrate, which is great. Hey, well, from 1% to 14%. But then they kind of coast from there because they're like, well, we kind of have maxed it out. It's like, actually, let's talk about significant scale. That's one of the things that we're focused on is what are those channels? What are those strategies where organizations can go 10x? And I don't mean 10x as like a euphemism. I mean like really like 10 times or depending on the organization, 100 times your current size. And that's very viable and doable. So I love that. Last question, Tracey, what gives you hope about sustainable generosity?
Just the fact that what generosity does for the donor themselves. Just the fact that it can grow you spiritually, it can grow you in just so many different ways in the long run. I think we battled so much with mental health and, whatever you want to say, entitlement and everything that's out there in the society. I think being able to really, what gives me hope is generosity and growing that in a sense. I know we're seeing decline in the numbers, but my focus is not, let's not focus on the numbers of where that's. Let's focus on how we really relate and bring generosity out and give people the opportunity to see how that can deepen their relationship with, whether it's with God, with community, with the organization that they serve. Because I think generosity just makes happier people. It makes the world better. So I still have hope for that.
Here. And that's the joint mission that we're on. And I couldn't say it any better. Thank you, Tracey. Tracey, I appreciate you just for investing who you are, for the vision that you've had, and for the determination and the actual hard work and discipline it takes to actually see that come to pass. So looking forward to seeing how.
It takes a team. It takes a great team to do
Absolutely. And just some wise counsel. I think I look forward to Flight Crew 6.0 and 7.0 and 10.0 and beyond.
So do I.
All right. Thanks, Tracey.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with insights that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For even more resources to help you build a thriving recurring giving program, go online to sustainablegiving.org. That's sustainablegiving.org. And lastly, if a leader comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference they need to start growing sustainable recurring giving for their own organization. Until next time, thanks for joining us.